Today I'd like to look at some of the databases that are the most handy in Japanese studies. This is the main page of the university libraries at the University at Albany, and the databases that we're going to be looking at today are available to you as a student, even if you're registered from another campus through the university. You should be able to access the databases that we're going to be looking at today. Now, admittedly, there's a ton of information you can get through the university website, and the databases are many and far-flung. We're only going to be looking at the most important ones. I would say that if you're an undergraduate and you're doing a research paper, if you go through these three databases that I'm going to show you in this video, you will have done due diligence and probably impress your professor. How do you find the databases? Well, you go to Databases on the main university website, click on that, and by default it opens up on Browse by Subject. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to just go down to East Asian Studies. That's not really where it's not really going to take me where I want to go. I'm going to search by name. And the first database that we're going to look at is called JSTOR. J stands for journal, as in scholarly journal. If you are accessing this from off campus, one of the things that you might want to do is click on this little UA icon because that will tell you information about accessing this off campus. If you're on campus, you don't need to worry about it. So let's look at JSTOR. What is JSTOR? JSTOR is a lot more than just East Asian Studies materials, but there are many East Asian Studies journals included here. This is a full text database, and that's really important. I'll show you why in a couple minutes, of scholarly journals across the disciplines. And you can search that full text using this search engine. This search engine I don't think I really need to explain. It's fairly it's intuitive. You can search by full text. You can search by a specific author of a article or a book review. You can search by an item title, etc. You can also add fields if you want to do a really complicated Boolean search. It's probably best to make sure this box is clicked, include only content I can access. Otherwise, you'll get hits for information that isn't necessarily going to be readily available to you. Now, I don't mean to be too cynical about it, but I do know that most undergraduates don't plan weeks and weeks ahead for research papers. Usually you're doing them at the last minute. So if you can't access the material right away, you're probably not going to have the time to do interlibrary loan. We are, by the way, going to be looking at interlibrary loan in the next video. You can also narrow by type. You can say I only want to see full articles, or I only want to see full books. Pamphlets are okay. Reviews, what they mean by reviews are book reviews, scholarly book reviews. And then everything else falls into the category of miscellaneous. You can also restrict it by a date range if you want, and by language. There aren't that many choices there. And frankly, when I do this, usually most of the hits that I get come up in English anyway. So I usually leave all of those pull-down menus as they are. You can narrow by discipline, which I do sometimes, although I always worry I'm going to miss something if all I do is check, say, Asian Studies. There are 73 journal titles underneath Asian Studies, and if we click on the plus box, we'll see all of those individual titles. Yet, I still worry if that's how I search, I'm going to be missing something. I really prefer to judiciously choose my search terms so that I'm sweeping across all of these different disciplines. But you can do it. I just want to point out that the most important journals, in my opinion, in Japanese studies, at least in the humanities, are the Journal of Japanese Studies, which here is archived between 1974 and 2007. Monumenta Nipponica, another very important one. The Journal of the Teachers of the Journal of the Association of Teachers of Japanese, which has changed its name recently to Japanese Language and Literature, the Journal of Asian Studies, and then finally the Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies. So all the big names are here. If you have trouble with getting too many hits, you could always check that box and see what you find. So let's just do a sample search. I'm going to input the name of a scholar I've been working on. His name is Anasaki Masaharu. Unfortunately, you cannot search using Japanese characters in this database yet. Maybe someday that will happen. And I'm just going to leave all the other fields as they are. I'll probably end up with way too many hits, but let's see what happens. I click on search and we have 246. That's quite a lot. The very first one is in German. Doesn't surprise me actually, because Monumenta Nipponica was originally largely a German journal. These days they always publish in English, but back then they published an awful lot in German. These are journal articles. If I scroll down a little further, I find some reviews, book reviews of books that Anazaki Masaharu published. Let me start with journals. If I click on the journal article title, it doesn't just give me the bibliographic information, it gives me the full text of the article. I can scroll through and see the entire thing. And notice my search terms, just like you would find on Google, are highlighted here. This is a super powerful search engine. Boy, I wish that I'd had it when I was a graduate student. You can shovel through an awful lot, sort through an awful lot of data very quickly this way. And if you find it on JSTOR, you don't have to worry about whether it's reliable information. JSTOR already does that, sorts through that kind of thing for you. Now, what about some of the other things that we saw in our hits? The reviews, these are book reviews, also come from scholarly journals. And when you find what you want, you can download it as view as a PDF. You can just look at the citation. You can email the citation to yourself. You can save it, etc., etc. You can also look for other information by the same author. In this case, all we have are his initials. But if you have a full name, that can be a very useful search method. If you click on View PDF, you'll find a disclaimer window that comes up and asks you if you agree to JSTOR's terms. If you agree to JSTOR's terms, in other words, that you will not repost or sell that material, the PDF will come up in a separate window, as you see here, and you can save it, download it, do whatever you want with it. Now, JSTOR is the first of two databases that we're going to be looking at, full-text databases. The difference between JSTOR and the other database, which is Project Muse, is that JSTOR tends to have what we call a firewall 5 years in. What does that mean? It means if you're looking for a journal that is 5 years old or younger, that was published 5 years ago or more recently, there's a good chance that it won't show up on JSTOR. They do that to protect the copyright and publishing industries. Project Muse tends to have a much smaller firewall, and so if you're looking for something much more recent, Project Muse is probably the way to go. Now, Project Muse, I'm going to go back to the UA Library database page, and we'll take a look at Project Muse, and it actually begins with a P. It's not just Muse, it is Project Muse. Project Muse has a lot of overlap with JSTOR. You'll find some of the same journals there, but it's not entirely the same. They're not exact equal circles on that Venn diagram. And their search engine is much simpler, as you see. I think of it as more sort of a web-savvy search engine. It looks more familiar to those of you who spend a lot of time on the internet. So I'm going to search books and journals. Same search term, and see what comes up. The Journal of Japanese Studies. Oh goodness, there's something that I published fairly recently. There's also book notes and some other stuff on or by Anazaki Masaharu. This, just like JSTOR, is a full-text database. If you want to download a PDF, you can do that. Here's the article that I wrote in 2011. And here it is appearing on the page exactly as it appears in the journal. I didn't point this out with JSTOR, but this is an important point. Notice the page number here, it's 61, because in the hard copy of the journal where this article was published, that's the page on which this article begins. So when you're citing something that you found on Project Muse or JSTOR, you often include not just the internet information, the URL, the stable URL, but you'll also probably include information, what page numbers it appears on originally in the journal, what issue, what number, and things like that. So Project Muse and JSTOR are great resources that give you very up-to-date information, and you don't even have to leave your desk chair to use them. You can use them 24/7. They're always available. The next and last database that I'm going to cover in this video is a little bit different. It's not a full-text database, but it's still important. It is called the Bibliography of Asian Studies Online. This was compiled by the Association of Asian Studies, and it originally was published as a paper bibliography. Every year a new volume would come out, and indeed here on the U Albany campus, if you go over to the reference section, you can find some old volumes of that bibliography. But finding information, searching information in those hard copies was very time consuming. Quite literally, one stood at the bookshelf, took one volume off the shelf at a time, leafed through to see if you could find what you were looking for in that particular year. And when you couldn't find it, you put that volume back on the shelf and you went to the next one. If you were searching over 20, 30 years, that took a tremendous amount of time. Happily, all that information has been digitized in the Bibliography of Asian Studies, and so now we can search the entire bibliography online. You may or may not have access to this database through your own library if you're working off of the U Albany campus, but again, you can access it through proxy pages on the U Albany site. So how to use the Bibliography of Asian Studies, there is a link there, but really it's a quite simple database. I'm going to use the same term and search for that in the entire record. Now what comes up is not a link to full text information. This is the big difference between BAS and JSTOR and Project Muse. So a lot of students kind of don't care too much about the Bibliography of Asian Studies, but I think they should, and I'll make an argument why. The Bibliography of Asian Studies does not just include scholarly journals. It includes books, it includes some journal articles, and perhaps most importantly, it includes book chapters. A lot of times you'll have one volume in which each chapter is on a different subject written by a different author, and if the book isn't carefully cataloged, it's very hard to find that information. Minerva certainly isn't going to find it for you. So the Bibliography of Asian Studies helps you find information. I like to think of it as information that's carefully hidden, but it's there. So here we have a number of hits on my search, with five hits. One is a journal article, and then down here we have a book, another book, and here is a section of a book, pages 247 to 268. But I couldn't have found that if I were just using Minerva. The Bibliography of Asian Studies will help me find it. And here's another journal. So using BAS requires a separate second step. You find the information, and then you physically probably have to go over to the library and find that book or whatever resource it is, take it off the shelf, take it out, and use it. But you'll find that it still provides you with much more information than simply going to the university library catalog. In the next video, I'm going to talk about finding material that's not in your library, Interlibrary Loan, and some other Japanese databases that are quite handy.